Once you're sort of in an organic system, what are the nutrient requirements? Well, I think it's fair to say that the number one limiting nutrient on organic farms is nitrogen. Um, Nitrogen is important to grow those grain crops like wheat and oats. Um, and so good green manuring with legumes or good rotations with perennial legumes that are well fertilized is really important. And so people often talk about phosphorus as being the Achilles heel of organic. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but we have to recognize that nitrogen is the nutrient that the plants use the most of. Um, but then turning to phosphorus, what do you do once you're in a grain sort of rotation? Let's say your rotation is, excuse me, a green manure and then two grain crops and then back to a green manure. Uh, how do you know that, what your phosphorus status of the soil is, and then what do you do about it? Well, what we've been doing is in those cases, uh, you can rely on the soil test for phosphorus. It's quite accurate. But what organic farmers often find themselves in is they're in that 8 part per million, 6 part per million of phosphorus, but yet their crops are growing quite well and their mustard is doing really, really well. And when mustard grows well, chances are you've got phosphorus in that soil, even if your soil test is showing it's a little low. The other thing that we've done is developed a tool called the green manure bioassay. So in that green manure year or in that alfalfa year before you switch to organic or before you grow your grain crop, instead of testing the soil, we actually take square meter samples of the green manure and just submit it for a feed test. And it tells us what that soil was capable of delivering into that plant. And it gives us a very good idea of not only the phosphorus deficiency, but also the sulfur, the potassium, any might copper. So it's been a very useful tool for assessing those nutrient levels. Manure is an obvious choice. It's usually the cheapest source in an organic system. If the manure is composted, it is better in organic farming because the nutrients are more readily available. If the manure is not composted and has a lot of carbon in it, it can immobilize nutrients from your crop. So you might be adding the phosphorus with the manure, but all that straw in the manure is locking up the nitrogen. So you end up with a poor crop.